We have a really good panel here today. I'm not going to read everyone's resume. That's always definitely the most boring part of any panel discussion, the reading of the resume. So we're going to skip over all that part and just refer to people directly in the conversation. Yeah, exactly right. Just a very few thoughts before we start the discussion, because that was a fantastic setup to what we want to talk about today. One of the numbers I was planning on citing, you got to me, ahead of me, and it's this very kind of striking difference between when you ask colleges, do they do a good job of preparing students for the workforce, and you ask the workforce, and it's like 90-10 and then flipped 10-90 or something like that. It's stark. And I think one of the reasons is we just have a basic frame of reference problem when we talk about higher education in America. Conventional wisdom is that we have a troubled K-12 system in this country and the best higher education system in the world. And when you ask people, why do we have a troubled K-12 system, what they often will cite is international comparisons. We are appropriately very sensitive to our competitors in other countries. And if you look at the average graduate of an American high school, what you find is that they're kind of in the middle on reading and bad at math. Americans are bad at math relative to other countries. And then you look at our higher education system and we say we're the greatest. Well, we say that because if you look at which countries in the world have the most great universities, we definitely do. If you look at a list of the top research universities in the world, something like 18 of the top 20 are American. What we never seem to ask is the same question we ask about our K-12 schools, which is, if you look at the average graduate of an American college or university and compare them to the average in another country, how do they look? Well, it turns out the answer is kind of in the middle in reading and bad at math. Which shouldn't surprise us. They're the same people, just 4 or 5 or 6 years later. And because of that, I think that feeds this self-image among our colleges and universities, and thus creates a political environment where we don't ask the kind of hard questions we need to ask about whether or not our higher education system is really doing all it needs to do to prepare the next generation of American workers. The second thing is, that's unusually a problem here in the United States because in the United States of America, as a matter of proportion to the rest of the economy and relative to our competitors, higher education is workforce training. We have a Department of Labor, we have workforce boards, we have workforce programs, but they are small compared to the number of people who go into jobs every year, unusually small. Our apprenticeship infrastructure is small. The extent to which people are trained through organized labor is very small. Unusually compared to pretty much any country we compete against, higher education is workforce training in America, and yet there are these profound differences in organizational culture, in sense of mission, as well as all the practical problems of exchange of information that we just heard about between the people who are subsidized by our taxpayer dollars, overwhelmingly charged with the task of preparing young people and not young people to make the transition into careers, profound problems in terms of how we hold them accountable, in terms of how we charge them with their mission, in terms of communication between those people and the employers who are ultimately on the receiving end of this wave of people coming into the workforce every year. So we have a great panel here today. I'm very excited to talk to everyone. And I actually wanted to, I'm going to start with Teresa Carlson, who's Vice President of Worldwide Public Sector Amazon Web Services. I am personally kind of fascinated by Amazon Web Services because it seems like this huge, important, successful company that the average people have never heard of because it's owned by the company that sells them Kindles and diapers and TV shows. First just tell us a little bit about, I think everyone probably knows about what Amazon Web Services does, but my question is, do you think it's possible that one solution to this disconnect or this need to improve in terms of preparing people for the workforce might be a company like Amazon doing something similar in the sense that you systematize so many of the systematizable functions of higher education that it radically lowers the barrier to entry for new people coming in who want to compete? And if the answer is yes, by the way, and you work for a traditional college or university, I think it should scare the hell out of you.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, everyone. So let me ask, who does know what Amazon Web Services does? Raise your hand if you know. Okay, that's pretty good. Well, we are the largest cloud provider in the world. We're the fastest growing IT company in the world. We have over 1 million active customers in 190 countries and growing. And I run our public sector business, and I'm glad to say we're also having governments and educational institutions around the world taking advantage of cloud. And I do agree with you. I think technology can be a really great driver toward changing academics, because what I see in all components of education, K through 12, higher ed, public, private, even adult education, they desperately want changes in how they are educating the students for them to be skilled. Again, there's all kinds of jobs, but we need the right skills. And technology is definitely a way to make that happen more rapidly. In fact, just one of the indicators of that are higher education institutions that are taking advantage of cloud computing are having massive amounts of savings. Those in the US and those globally. One quick example of this is we work with Australian Open University, and they look at open access across the globe, and they wanted to run a MOOC, a massive online course, to assess that. And they came back to us, they ran it on Amazon Web Services, and said they had 99% savings. They were so blown away. They said we had 99% savings running this MOOC on AWS, and we got the outcomes and results really fast. You were talking about data analytics earlier, the ability, and Kaplan's using cloud, but the ability to take in and absorb the analytics of actually what's happening, and then use the residuals of the savings and put it back into education. And we have to update our infrastructure. We have to update the models. And technology is just a great way. Now, on commoditizing, you ask a question, I'll answer just real quickly, which could a company like Amazon be a catalyst toward sort of commoditization of, I think, education? I think the answer is, I don't think we replace, but I think we have an ability to enhance and add on to what educational institutions are doing, perhaps by helping catalog, get the information out more rapidly, being able to take what the universities and even the elementary and junior high school programs are doing and showcase those more and bring best practices. And I'm not going to talk about it now, but later I would love the opportunity to share how in our AWS Educate program we're bringing all those best practices together for professors to share those things, which I'll save that for a little bit later.
Great, thanks. Tom, so when we were preparing for this panel and we were talking ahead of time, and I found out that someone from Snap-on was going to be here, I was very excited. I have a couple of uncles who grew up fixing motorcycles and cars. And like Snap-on was like the name that you thought of in terms of if you were serious, you were a Snap-on man. And so, and I know that Snap-on has been one of your many success areas has been partnerships with community colleges, because a lot of the people who are going to be, either work for you or users of your product come through our community colleges, which tend to be more vocationally oriented. How have you managed to successfully partner with community colleges?
Well, thanks, Kevin. It's been a very important piece for Snap-on to be present in the community, work closely with community colleges for really 50 years now. That's when we first got involved with technical education. And the reason for that relationship is Snap-on's very privileged to sit in the middle of a very important triangle for the skilling and the workforce development in the United States. We sit between students, schools, and local employers in a way that gives us a special feel for what each one of those stakeholders requires. And that's because of the way that we're situated in local communities. You talked about your uncles who worked on their motorcycles in a serious way. Snap-on needs technically trained workforce because we manufacture and we sell tools and technical solutions for professionals, for people who are serious about their jobs. Our manufacturing plants require technically trained workers to produce highly specific, in many cases very technically advanced tools, and then we need to sell them to technically trained workers as well. Either part of that, either end of that pipeline tightens up, and Snap-on's in trouble. So we do believe in being present and investing in the local conversation about technical education. There's no better place to do that than community colleges. That's really the center of gravity of Snap-on's place in the technical education ecosystem. We think it's very important. These are schools where people are looking for hands-on training. These are schools where the faculty is not typically pulled between research and instruction. And these are places where people in the community are looking to advance knowledge in something that they're good and something that they're passionate about, and typically stay in the area. And so Snap-on's very involved in that part of the technical education process. Community colleges, very important because they train in the areas that are so important to us: vehicle service, aviation, facility and plant maintenance, building services, et cetera. And they're in a position to make professionals out of people who want to contribute in those areas. So when we get involved in with schools and with local industries, that's the conversation that we try to set up. We're very involved in touching each one of the areas that I mentioned, and in doing so, we understand, because we're selling tools to local industry, what kind of skills are needed. We understand from talking to students what it is they want to do with their careers. We understand from talking to the schools where their curriculum is headed, and we try to facilitate that conversation so that it comes together. And we have found in recent years that being in the center of that conversation is an important one. And as we develop programs for about 295 community colleges, we work with each of those stakeholders to make sure that the training that is going on addresses what students need to get jobs, addresses what industry needs to hire qualified employers, and addresses what instructors need to know that they've given both the theory and the hands-on practice using Snap-on tools to staff a technically trained workplace.
Kathleen Powell, I know that in addition to being president-elect of the National Association of Colleges and Employers, you also work for a traditional college and universities, subject of some criticism in different ways. I'm curious, from your perspective within the academy, how colleges and universities see their role as organizations responsible for preparing young people to successfully begin careers. As an outside observer, I sometimes sense some ambivalence, as if the word vocational is like a dirty word or something like that. But at the same time, I understand that colleges rightly see their mission as more than just economic. They have a research function. They have a function to prepare people to be citizens as well as workers. How does that play out inside the university when it comes to making decisions and asking themselves, are we doing all we need to prepare students for this step in their economic lives?
Maybe? Is it on? Oh, okay, good. Again, I work at a traditional liberal arts founded institution, and I think when we talk about vocationalism, we do talk about it because parents are looking for a return on the investment, and I was telling Tom earlier that in higher education we can't operate in a vacuum, in a silo, and think that we are the be-all and end-all to a system in which we have a product, which is a student, and we're trying to connect them with the world of work. And Jamie Ann Studley, who was the former deputy and acting under secretary for the U.S. Department of Education, talks, and she actually wrote about, vocationalism is not a dirty word. And as we're trying to get our students career ready, she talks about that also. And I think that we have talked about that just in general, that career readiness is something that we're looking to help our students train up, and we are using career readiness and career competencies through the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and partnering with our business leaders to make sure that we are having the same language and that we are making sure that our students are career ready and that they have a particular skill set and that they are graduating not with debt, although some do, and that it's a bigger picture, and it's not just one opportunity for a particular group of students coming through that higher education pipeline, that we are working to solve for X, and that it's important that we do that with our business leaders, and that we are looking at curriculum development and core competencies, internships, co-ops. So it is a bigger problem-solving issue than just, getting that job and what that looks like.
I know any kind of university policy is with the full participation and consent of the faculty, not just a directive to them. So how do you manage that relationship successfully?
Yes. I think you figure out who your champions are on the faculty side of the house, and there are faculty who are very traditional and they are not interested in hearing. They're there to teach. That's their job, and they think students are there just to learn. And I think, again, it's a both and, that we have to understand what they're trying to impart on our students, but I also think the bigger picture is how are we educating our students to understand that theory to practice, and getting employers and, again, organizations into the classroom. Some are very good about doing that in terms of the faculty side, and then others will just say, that's not my job, that's not what I do. It really starts, in my personal opinion, from the top down, and when the president says, this is the landscape, this is the strategy that we're implementing in terms of employers coming into our academy, that changes. It's a game changer. It does change the landscape of higher education.
And Tom McInerney, at Genworth, a question came up earlier, do employers read transcripts? Do they look at grades? From your perspective, when you're in a hiring situation, and I'm sure, like myself and anyone, the quality of your hires goes a long way to determining the success of your business, what kind of information do you look for, and what kind of information do you wish you had that you don't have now?
I would say, first of all, at Genworth, we've actually, and this came up yesterday in some of the discussions, we've actually located our major operations in the parts of the country where there are excellent higher education institutions. And most of the jobs at Genworth require a 4-year or advanced degree. And so we're blessed because we have one division that's based in Richmond, Virginia, excellent public universities in Virginia, UVA, Virginia Tech, William & Mary, Virginia Commonwealth. And then we have another division, a mortgage insurance division, that's based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and so UNC, Duke, et cetera. So first of all, I would say we find it's critically important to be located in parts of the country or world, where we are in some other countries, where you have access to students who are coming through great universities, so that's one. And your question on, I've probably hired, I don't know, I would guess 5,000 people in my 38-year career. I've never looked at a transcript. I can say that. I do definitely where they went to college or university, why they chose that, what they did when they were there. GPA matters, but it's also what leadership did they have while there. We do find, if you look at not necessarily the first job, but the people who are going to make it into leadership positions down the road, people actually play sports, were captain of their sports team, participated in teams, obviously student government, though. Anybody who took a leadership position, led or was an influential player in a team usually are a good fit. And I also think that, I would say that when people come to us from a 4-year college, they're at the beginning of their careers. They have basic skills, but they need to learn a lot of things before I'd say they're wise business people or leaders. We do have the nature of the insurance business highly mathematical, analytical, so Math majors tend to do very well in the insurance industry and with our company. And it's not just basic math, algebra, it's advanced calculus and et cetera. But we have a lot of IT. Probably most of our employees are in an IT kind of a job, data management. As you can imagine, millions of customers around the world. They do millions of transactions. We collect premiums and pay out claims on a daily basis. So, and having the kind of, I was laughing at Betty, who was talking about COBOL. I actually was trained originally in Fortran, so I was one ahead of COBOL. But I'd say one of the great things about millennials, and it came up earlier today, what millennials want. I would say what millennials are really good at is social media, and increasingly all the things we do in business, more and more of the products and services that we provide are through social media. So that's a big strength. I am surprised because someone, I think Betty also mentioned, well, from Harvard you think they're very bright. I have been surprised in my career at people who go to great universities, and you would think that their ability to write and to give oral presentations would be top notch. We find that is a skill set that needs to be a lot better than it is, particularly defending their point of view in presentations in front of important people, and the confidence that's required for that is important. I also find, and maybe this is just part of being the brighter you are, sometimes the worse you write, because you may write technically very well, but to try to understand something, and most decisions in our company are made based on probably a 2 or 3 page memo and a couple slides. We don't, some people do the 50, 60 page things, but it's the speed of decision making. So being able to write well and in a very short, few pages, critical paragraphs to get the message and the key points across. And then we find where we're blessed, I think, being in Virginia and North Carolina and having the higher education we continue to use, I would say, in the U.S., probably 90% of our employees were interns in their senior year in college. They mostly come from the universities that we have relationships with. And so we're able to, in the year that they intern, assess their overall skills and what they've learned, what their credentials, what their degree is in, but how will they likely do in our company. We also have, and this is one of the great things about the internet and learning online, and what Kaplan and others do, is we require most employees, regardless of their job, have to take 2 or 3 standard internet courses per year, and then probably another 2 or 3. So it's probably about 40 hours just on education delivered over the internet. And then for first-time managers, we have a 1-week course that they actually go off-site to one of the universities or business schools that we work with. And then we have a 2-year executive education. It's kind of like an executive MBA program that would be for people that are probably between 10 and 15 years in their career. And we want to teach them the latest in terms of leadership kinds of skills. So I do think that we need, and this is probably where you go back to K through 12, we do an awful lot to help K through 12 school systems, particularly in the inner cities, Richmond and Raleigh or Durham. But I think having better math and science skills, better communication skills, better skills at using new technologies, those are all the things that I like to see K through 12 and higher ed. I mean, they can teach the philosophy and religion and all that, but having some of those core skills covered somehow in their curriculum, I think would make the students coming out better equipped day one. But ultimately, I think where business and higher ed can work is, how do you then, over a 20 or 30 year career, recognizing, this was also said yesterday, that one of the challenges of millennials is they're usually going to be around for 3 or 4 years, and then they have 7 or 10 companies they're going to work for. But still, I do think we feel that having these relationships, partnerships, long-term partnerships with higher education, universities, where we can, working with the faculty who get it, Kathleen, that are willing to change how their education in a way where it makes their students better contributors to companies and society, I think we find there's enough of them there that are willing to change exactly how they teach.
I'm sorry I missed the what do millennials want a discussion. As an employer, I find the answer is promotions. They want. Yeah. Kind of coming back around to Kaplan, which is a university that's grown a lot over the last 10 or 15 years and established a strong presence in terms of competency-based education, learning-based education. And I was interested in what you said about how you try to reach out to the business community to find out, to get feedback, and you don't get much in return, and that's a barrier for you. We're here in Washington. One of the things that a focus of federal higher education policy over the last couple of years under this administration has been gathering more information about economic outcomes, both at the collegiate level and at the programmatic level within colleges. Now, I understand that's in the context of a regulatory discussion that's somewhat controversial. We don't need to go there for this panel discussion, but I am interested in is that information useful to you in your job? Now that you can see, Kaplan runs a lot of different kinds of programs, and you can see more detailed information that wasn't even available to you from the IRS about 3, 5, 10 years out in different programs, different kinds of students, average earnings, 90th percentile. Does that illuminate anything about your programs and feedback into how you do your work?
Absolutely. The thing that's so interesting about all the work associated with what program, what outcomes, what happens 3 years, 5 years, 10 years later, is that it doesn't matter where you went to school. What matters is what degree you took. If you did a degree in medical assisting, when you leave school, you're going to make between $18,000 and $25,000 a year. I don't care where you got that degree. And that the 18 to 25 pretty much depends on what part of the country you're in. If you got a degree in nursing, which is different than medical assisting, obviously, you're going to be $50,000 to $60,000 a year a few years out. Again, doesn't matter very much where you went to school. And one of the challenges that we have as a society, and this may be a little bit too much for this crowd, I don't know, is we do not compensate all important professions equally. The helping professions are typically undercompensated, and the entertainment professions are overcompensated. And everything else sort of falls in between. But there's this misconception that where you went to school makes a difference. A film major at NYU, even though she paid, I don't know, $120,000 for her degree.
More?
Okay, I'm way out of date. Is not going to get a job that gives her a return on her educational investment unless she's one of a very few. Likely she's going to work in, I don't know, a photography shop. This is the problem that we've got in our society, that the quality of the education and where you went to school has very little to do with how much you make. It's what program you took.
Yeah, you brought up medical assisting, which I think is an interesting example. It's a very large sector, I think largely unknown to people who live in the sort of rarefied bachelor's degree and better world of, not unknown in the sense that you see them if you go to the doctor, but in the sense of how that market works. But it also seems, it's a good example of how I think we can't just assume that markets will be efficient, particularly in something complicated like education. There are all kinds of providers of medical assisting degrees. I mean, you can pay $4,000 to a community college and $28,000 to a for-profit college. There are some medical assisting degrees are tied to certification, some aren't. The certification regimes are different in different states. And when we think that these are often first-generation students who by definition don't have a family background that can help them make these important decisions, it just seems like we're falling down somehow. The outcomes are often not that great in terms of broadly speaking, but then you look through the different kinds of programs and there is a lot of variance. Teresa, I know you had mentioned there was some more you wanted to tell us about Amazon Web Services, so I would love to hear that.
Thank you. And I was going to address real quickly, you were talking about what do companies look for in skills, and I wanted to talk just for 1 second about what Amazon looks for. I look to see, does someone have a degree? It does make a difference sometimes in terms of the program. I'm from Kentucky. I'm a state college educated girl, and I believe all things are possible. Ivy League, community college. So I really believe it's here and here and here that gets you there. You know, it's passion. But when we look at people, it's very interesting. We assess based off our leadership principles. At Amazon, our leadership principles are all over the web. And Jeff built the business on these leadership principles, and it is very ingrained in our culture. And when we do interviewing, we look at the resume, we get the resume, we assume the person has the skills necessary to do that job. But then for the interview itself, we actually interview them against our leadership principles. And we use a group approach. There's usually 3 to 5 or more, but they're given a set of leadership principles to interview that person, and we expect them to be able to communicate crisply. They always have a written, they have to write something that we assess. So we assess for written and verbal, crispness, their ability to analyze something and dive deep and not be surface level. And it's very interesting. Those outcomes, sometimes myself in the beginning of coming to Amazon, I wasn't used to that style. And it works so well because you have a group of people assessing against leadership principles that are really important, because what we found is we can hire someone really smart, but if they don't meet our culture and our leadership principle bar, they have a very low probability of being successful at the company. So it's interesting. So when you talk about education of those elements, those educational elements have to take into consideration good writing, good communication, things like that. So one quick point on whose responsibility is it to help sort of skill up our students, our workforce? And we believe it is definitely a combination, and we can't just leave it in the hands of all educational institutions, but industry and enterprises have to help with that, especially if you're in a new sector like we are in cloud, and there's millions of jobs. If you just go to Indeed.com and just search on cloud, you'll find 55,000 jobs like that just that have the word cloud in it. So lots of jobs for cloud, and Forbes just did a study on the top certifications in tech, and Amazon Web Services Solution Architect was #1. Now, you don't have to go to college or go to community college to have a certification, but the likelihood of you passing that first bar could be very difficult if you didn't have a degree before you get there. But the reason I bring that up, there is a plethora, and it basically states that certification starts at $125,000 a year. So we can skill up lots of jobs, lots of opportunity to make more income with tech jobs. And what we've done is we've created a model called AWS Educate. I talked about it last year when I was here. I wanted to give you an update if you were here. We're now in over 500 universities globally with this AWS Educate program, and thousands of students have signed up. And what that program is, it's a crowdsourced model where professors, there's content created on how you teach cloud. That content is shared, and we help curate. We give them feedback on that content to say, we don't dictate, because we know professors don't want you to dictate, but we're trying to influence them to teach a new modern style of tech. So we help curate that. We give them content. We go out to the universities. We do code-a-thons, hackathons. We support both the student and the professor with grants, free grants. The next model, the next phase of that is our Cloud Academy, which we actually certify. We work with the professors so they can actually provide a training and accreditation program in the university. We're launching our Cloud Academy for K through 12 this year. In 2017, we want to launch a jobs board where we actually put all those students that have passed that. So, where companies out there can say, I need these skills. I was just in Richmond doing a cyber panel 2 days ago, and Capital One is dying for cloud skills. They're constantly recruiting. So we want to help bridge that gap, and we need to be able to do that to support, because we're creating millions of jobs now, and we have to make sure, as the #1 cloud provider in the world, we feel we have to help create that academic environment and those students in that skilled workforce. Because if there's jobs, somebody's got to skill them to do that. And we want to be able to partner both with, community colleges, certification programs, higher ed, universities, whatever's out there. But we have to start very young, and we got to get the women involved and keep them there, because right now, even though about 57% of the workforce is women today, 25% or less is in tech, and they don't stay. So we got to get that going as well.
Tom, I'm curious, I'm sure that what you're expecting out of graduates evolves as the technology evolves and the workforce evolves. You have multiple relationships. How do you manage it if on some level you feel like your community college partners aren't where they need to be?
Well, there's great cooperation there, and the schools these days are eager to stay up. They're eager to attract students. They want to retain them, and they want to place them, all as a way of being effective members of their community. What we find is that and this is an interesting counterpoint to Teresa and to Tom's points, in the areas that Snap-on's involved in. This is not liberal arts or high-tech kinds of positions. We're talking about training technicians for hands-on employment, and we find that the cooperation with schools is very important, because the schools are excellent at developing and communicating the theory and beginning the hands-on how-to part of a technical degree. Where Snap-on is eager to jump in is to bring the tools, literally the tools, to schools that can be used so that when a student graduates, they not only know why they're doing something, but how to do it, and how to do it with the best tools that are on the market. That's very important to us, and we find that employers are very eager to talk to students who say, I know how to use a Snap-on torque wrench, or I am trained to use the most recent Snap-on diesel diagnostic tool, and other examples like that. So where we get involved is bringing that latest technology to the school's attention, and then working with them to integrate into their curriculum the hands-on piece with Snap-on tools, so that not only does a student graduate with a degree in automotive technology and service, but they're able to show that they know how to use the latest tools that are on the market. They can demonstrate to their employers that they're certified to use tools that allow them to work more productively, work more safely, and work as a high-performing member of a team.
I have a bunch more questions, but I'm sure you do too, and I want to leave some time for questions from the audience. So please raise your hand, and I assume there's a microphone out there. Yes, sir, right here.
Yeah, thank you for a really...
I think we have a microphone coming your way. Yeah.
Thank you for an excellent panel. I'm Michael Polyakov, Vice President of the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. I wanted to link three thoughts that we heard today. First, yours, Kevin, that higher ed remains the biggest provider of workforce training. And then, Betty Vanderbroek, you told us that about 5 years is the lifespan of technical training. And Tom, you reminded us that a lot of college graduates are coming out who can't write, can't speak. So my question to the panel is, what's the role of business and industry in incentivizing higher education to do a better job of providing students, graduates, with the core skills they need so they won't be obsolete and they won't be doing catch-up in areas that should be basic for any profession? Thanks.
I'll take a first stab at that and say that, I do meet with the presidents and the deans and some of the key faculty members at probably 15 universities, colleges per year. And one of the things that I talk to them about is on the people we've hired from their institutions, what we find. And so I will, on the point of writing and oral presentations and persuasion skills, that's a big one. IT, math, because we're, the company we are. One thing I didn't mention is global. I do think that we also, we're in a number of countries around the world, and even for our U.S. businesses, they're impacted a lot by what's going on in the world. So we do also put a high priority on universities that have study abroad programs. Most do these days, and then students who have done that, and particularly those who have become immersed in other cultures, learn how to survive where there isn't their normal comfort zone. So again, I would say we spend as much time as we can on the primary universities, colleges, some cases community colleges that deal with, to try to encourage the presidents, the deans, some of the key, as Kathleen said, open-minded faculty members. And I found pretty good success. One thing that I think is driving that, I'm actually on the board of trustees at the business school at Dartmouth, and we've had a lot of interesting interactions with parents who are, it used to be, I think at Dartmouth it's $65,000 a year, just, it's a lot. But and interesting, and if you go from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s into the 80s, that cost was justified by the jobs they got. But those curves have changed, and so I do think we're also going to find, particularly at the more expensive schools, the parents are also going to help to make sure that their children, when they come out, aren't going to end up living at home. So, my experience has been with the institutions that we deal with, it's been a very good relationship, and that the presidents, the deans, and the key faculty members do listen, and they do. I mean, they want to train and educate their students the way they think it should be done, and a lot of them are excellent at it. But I do think that they are increasingly understanding the world's more competitive today, and they obviously want their graduates to be successful over their lifetimes. And so I do think that most will want to make sure that the students that they're educating, the graduates that they have, end up being very successful in life. That obviously helps them too over time in their fundraising, et cetera. But I found it to be, and so I would say to Betty, I'm always willing to come talk to any president or leader of any university to give you our thoughts. But I tend to be optimistic that the competitive situations around the world and in the U.S. today are such that universities even the leading ones are going to have to be more open-minded to make sure that the students they're graduating have more useful skills that can serve them well in the first few years of a job, but also over their careers.
I would like to add on to that, so I have a lot of things in my head. So sitting in my day job in career services and working with employers, and then sitting as the incoming president for NACE. So when Teresa talks about the hackathon, so we, and I think other institutions also rely on employers. It's one thing to say students need to write. They need to write better. They need to speak more articulately. And it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to show them. And we really rely on the employer base, the businesses, to come in and do the hackathons, to do the case competitions. CIA will come and do different simulations, although you never know they're there, but they come. And it's about having that, it's showing, it's doing, it's that expectation. So we can tell our students about being career ready, about the competencies employers are looking for, but it's when the businesses actually are in front of our students and they say, these are the skill bases that we're looking for, this is how you need to write this, these are the expectations. I can say it till I'm blue in the face. Tom can come and say it one time and it's like, oh my gosh, Tom just said it, so it must be true, and it is. So I think it's having those connections and making sure that as a higher education institution, and not just William & Mary, but just across the country, that we are doing the both and, that it's about looking at our curriculum, it's about trying to train up for that next generation of workers. That makes all the difference. And sitting with my NACE hat on, we actually have 10,000 members. We're a professional association, and it's us connecting colleges and universities with businesses across the country. And we actually came together with a task force and we asked what are those competencies that the next world of work, what we're looking for. And we landed on communication, that's oral and written, both of those. We landed on that teamwork idea. We talked about ethics and leadership. So there's a variety of things that we're trying to do, again, solving for that X, and we can't do it siloed. We have to make sure that we're having those open conversations, and we talk about that connected model, that collaborative model. And again, we can't do what we do without that support, with having those companies come and recruiting our students. Deloitte does an amazing job with affinity groups within their organization, and I don't think that they're the only company that's doing that. So they will grab, I'll use William & Mary as an example, they grab all their William & Mary employees together and they have their own affinity group, and then they talk about the brand. So it might not be Deloitte coming to campus, although they do that regularly, but they're talking about this is what a Deloitte brand is, this is what the strategy is, this is what the culture is, this is the way that we work within our organization. So there's many things happening, I think, across the academy, and again, not being siloed and reaching out, to the Amazons, to the Genworths, to the Snap-ons, which we love Snap-on in our household, by the way. Again, I think it's that collaboration that makes a difference.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes, right here.
Hi, my name is Monica Dorhai, and I'm Vice President Risk, and I also do government affairs here in Washington, and I got my PhD 10 years ago. My number one issue, being here in Washington, and many a times I work with your government relations, the number one, if you want to be successful in the long run here in Washington, the number one issue you need to solve is the education and the graduates that you come up with and the courses you come up with, how realistic they are in the workplace and how easy they generate that job and the link. The stronger you are in establishing that link between the education, the courses, and the real life, real industry, that's where your success. So if you're in a leadership position, work on that link between your education program and the industry. As many leaders or industries. Really, your key, I think, for the panel, because it's a very broad area, and we are here in Washington. So the question is, how do I go right now on the Hill, and how do I help all of you? It's very broad. You can go. So, but that's your strength. That's in your hand. This is if I have that link, I know how to shape, and really, the courses really need to reflect the workplace and simulate it. That's when you get the best. MBAs are really good at that. So. Thank you.
I'm not really sure how to respond because, as we think about the link, there's a link between soft skills, disciplinary skills, and workplace requirements. Now, lots of folks are talking about soft skills. NACE has a list. CED has a list. The Business Roundtable has a list. They're kind of the same. They're kind of different. But, until we come to a place where we agree that this is what it is and this is how we're going to measure it, it's very challenging to find the link, right? You've got to start from somewhere that's a little bit concrete. In terms of being able to synthesize all those pieces, that's a higher level learning ability, and yes, MBAs are taught that kind of thing. Now, I'm sure there are lots of people in this room who would say MBAs haven't got it either, because there are so many idiosyncrasies in particular organizations. And there's a matching process. There are some universities that are really good for some companies, and there are other universities that company says, I don't know why they think they're a good university. And that's got to do with taste, much more than with the underlying substance, at least in my estimation.
I think we're out of time, so please join me in thanking our panel.